You are born into a world where, honestly, no one expects much from you, and that becomes your first advantage. Not because you are special, but because you're too ordinary, and that ordinariness makes you easy to underestimate. Brooklyn, 1950s, not poor enough to be tragic, but not enough for you to dream of anything bigger. The house you live in, everything feels like it belongs to someone else, and that feeling follows you through childhood. Your father takes care of other people's gardens, your mother takes care of other people's children, and you grow up in a just enough life. You're not hungry, but never ahead either, and you learn early. Surviving does not mean being important. From a young age, you realize something important. Life gives you enough to live, but never enough to become someone. And that makes you understand. If you want more than others, you will have to find a way to break the rules. By age 7, you have something that becomes dangerous later, a face that makes people trust you instantly. Light freckles, soft smile, harmless eyes, but inside, you begin to understand you can use it. Adults like you, teachers trust you, neighbors call you a good kid, and you realize everything is easier than expected. You smile slightly, but in your head you think, that's it. And that's when you start seeing the world differently. By age 10, you're not just smart, you understand how people work, and that becomes the real danger. You realize people don't believe truth, they believe what they want. And if you play the role, you win. You learn fast, skipping grades, finishing early, and by 16, you are already ahead of almost everyone. But even smarter, you're still not respected, and that starts to feel a little off. You sit among adults, understanding them faster than they understand you, but still, no one sees you as important. And then you realize an uncomfortable truth. The smartest person isn't respected, the richest one is. At that moment, you stop dreaming, you stop imagining a nice future, and make a cold decision instead. Not hope, not effort, but I will be rich, and you say it like it's already true. You don't know how yet, but you're not worried because you know people check less than you think. And if you're confident enough, convincing enough, sometimes you don't actually need to have it. At 18, you enter NYU, studying math, surrounded by smart people, but something feels missing. There are formulas, theories, but no power, and that starts making you impatient. You give it 3 years to confirm something simple. Intelligence earns respect from teachers. Wealth earns respect from the world. So you drop out. No drama, no speech, just, this place won't get me to the right people. You don't need knowledge. You need access. You don't want to know more. You want to be near powerful people. You start hearing about elites, people playing a completely different game, one you are not invited to. You try to find them, but nothing, no directory, no connections, and you realize this is not a public system. You go home, sit, eat food you didn't buy, and then a very simple idea appears. If you can't enter the elite, get close to their children, because wealthy people share one clear weakness. They care deeply about their kids, and they trust anyone who seems to help them. So you do the most logical thing. If you're smart, but morally flexible, you lie, not a small lie, but I have 2 math degrees, and you say it naturally. You apply to Dalton, an elite school where CEOs, kids, politicians, and future power are shaped. Interview day, you walk in with a ready smile, steady eyes, and confidence slightly too high. The headmaster looks at you, and you look back like, I belong here, a confidence hard to challenge. You talk about education, children, passion, and casually add, my mother was a teacher. Not completely true, but not completely false, and in your mind, that's valid. He believes you, of course he does. People always believe what they want to believe. And just like that, you start teaching the 1% children, but there's one thing you don't say. You're not here for the kids, you're here for the parents, and that's the real objective. You attend every meeting, arrive early to every event, firm handshake, perfect eye contact, always leaving an impression. You learn names, companies, habits, and especially their egos, because that's the easiest thing to control. You're not networking, you're analyzing. Every wealthy parent is a problem, and you are very good at solving it. You leave a strong impression. He's going places, and you know, they're right. They just don't know how far you'll go, and that is the interesting part. Eventually, the school finds out, and honestly, you're not that surprised. You were never subtle, but it doesn't matter anymore because you already have something better. One parent pulls you out and takes you somewhere completely different. You walk into Wall Street. No real degree, no paperwork, just one thing, confidence that's slightly dangerous. And strangely, in this place, nobody asks if you're real. They only ask, can you make money? You quickly understand, this isn't a place of truth. It's a place of results, and results always speak louder than ethics. You work like you could be replaced at any moment, and somehow, that makes you very hard to replace. You don't learn from books, you learn from people, and you realize people are easier to read than numbers. You start making money, not a lot at first, but enough to see the game is slowly leaning your way. You get invited into conversations you once could only imagine, and now you're sitting right inside them. You meet wealthy people, the kind who don't talk about money, because money is the least interesting thing they have. You observe them, how they speak, how they stay silent, and how they make others listen without trying. And then you realize the law doesn't disappear here. It just becomes suspiciously flexible. You don't feel uncomfortable. You feel relieved because finally the world starts making sense. If you are valuable enough, the rules avoid you, not the other way around. And that sounds very motivating. You begin helping clients save millions in taxes, using methods you probably wouldn't list on a resume. You don't just handle money, you handle people. And that's when you become actually dangerous. You learn their names, their fears, and the small secrets they assume no one notices. And you make sure of one thing, every single one of them remembers you, even if they don't want to. Because in this world, being remembered matters more than being right. And you are becoming unforgettable. You don't need to be the best. You just need to be the one they can't get rid of. Time passes. You're 27, making serious money, and showing up in places that look very expensive. It sounds impressive, but you know it's just level 1, and you're not playing this game to stay on easy mode. You don't just want to be rich. You want to be in a position where people are careful when they say your name. So you do what you always do, build connections, not friendships, but something far more useful. You go to lunches, parties, everywhere you can, and always show up at the right time with the right people. You speak when needed, stay quiet when needed, and sometimes silence makes others talk more. You start to understand, powerful people don't fear mistakes. They fear losing control of consequences. And that's when it hits you, money isn't real power, controlling consequences is. You begin to believe, with enough connections, even if you're wrong, you'll always find a way out. It sounds risky, but looking around, you realize everyone here is playing the same way. Everything runs smoothly, almost too smoothly, and you start thinking maybe you've figured it all out. Until a small mistake appears, and this time, it's not as small as you thought. An IPO deal, not entirely clean, not entirely legal, and very clearly you're doing. You get pulled into an investigation, quiet, but serious enough to remind you this is not a game. For the first time in a long time, you ask yourself, am I going too far? And it feels uncomfortable. You think you might stop, but then you realize you're not the kind of person who turns back. You don't stop, you adjust, because in your mind, there's always another way forward. You leave Wall Street, not because you lost, but because staying is no longer worth it. And when you leave, you take the most valuable thing with you. Not money, but connections. A contact list full of names that if you call, they will remember exactly who you are. And you understand clearly, the game isn't over. It's just getting serious now. You think you've figured out the game until someone appears, and this time, it's not money, it's something else. Her name is Bonnie, and right away, you feel she's not like anyone you've met before. Not because she's rich, but because she understands how the world works, just like you, in a slightly unsettling way. She's warm, the kind of warmth that makes people feel safe, and that is something you've never been good at faking. You look at her not as a relationship, but as potential, a system waiting to be built. And within minutes, you realize you both share the same belief. Power isn't something given. It's something taken. You invite her to dinner, talk about work, money, the world, and everything flows naturally. But you're not there to talk. You're guiding. Every question, every pause has a purpose. You tell her about the wealthy, the parties, the private meetings, and the things never spoken out loud. You talk about demand, things money can't directly buy, but always exist in the shadows. You don't say the plan, but you know she's smart enough to understand exactly what you want. And then she says it, the idea you've thought about but never said out loud. A system where the young, the trusting are approached, promised things, and slowly pulled in. It sounds simple, but the way she says it makes it feel completely possible. You don't hesitate because you know this isn't just an idea, it's an opportunity at the right time. And just like that, everything begins. At first, it's just one person, one case, a test, like let's see if this works. You meet the first girl, young, nervous, holding her bag like a shield, and you are fully prepared. You know her situation, struggling family, unfinished dreams, and exactly what she needs most. You start gently, asking, listening, nodding, creating the feeling that you understand her. You do what you always do best, make people believe you're on their side. And once trust appears, everything else is just time. You offer help, talk about opportunities, connections, the future, and you say it casually. You don't force anything. You simply place a choice in front of her and add just enough money. Not too much, but enough to make the decision difficult to refuse. And when she says yes, you realize something very clearly. It works. No complexity, no perfection needed, just the right psychology is enough. And from that point, you stop testing and you start building. One person a week, then two, then more, and everything accelerates fast. Bonnie handles the front, approaching, building trust, bringing them to the right place at the right time. And you handle the rest, and you do it with unsettling precision. You don't see them as people. You see them as data, situations, and weaknesses to be used. It sounds cold, but to you it's just a system, and systems don't have emotions. You optimize everything. How you speak, how you approach, how you build trust faster, deeper. And the scariest part is you get better at it, and it starts to feel normal. At first, you hesitate, you think, but slowly, everything becomes routine. A process repeated, improved, expanded like any other business. And that's when you cross the real line. Not because you don't know, but because you know exactly and keep going anyway. Everything starts getting bigger, not from a plan, but from results, because when something works, always expands on its own. The first people aren't random. They're introduced step by step, layer by layer, through the names you built before. At first, it's just quiet, private meetings, good wine, deep conversations, and things that don't need to be said directly. No one asks outright, but everyone understands, and that unspoken agreement is what keeps everything safe. You're not selling a service. You're selling an experience, something money can't openly buy, but always exists. And when the first ones come back, you know you've touched something they would never admit out loud. The client list begins to change, not just wealthy people, but people with power, real power. Politicians, businessmen, names you used to only see in newspapers, now sitting right in front of you. They don't ask much, because they don't need to. They only need to know how trustworthy you are. And you understand clearly. Trust here isn't about morality. It's about how well you can keep secrets. That's when you add another layer to the system. Not to make money, but to maintain control. You start keeping everything, images, information, small details that others assume no one notices. You don't call it evidence, you call it insurance, because in this world, everyone needs insurance. And just like that, you're no longer just a provider. You become the one holding leverage. No one says it, but everyone knows once you step in, stepping out won't be easy. You don't threaten. You don't need to, because once they understand, they keep themselves in the game. The system runs smoothly, too smoothly, to the point you almost forget it started as just an idea. You expand, more locations, more people, more layers, making everything harder to trace. One house, then two, then more. Each place looks similar, but never exactly the same. Everything is designed, so if one part falls, the rest keeps running normally. You're not building a business, you're building a network, and networks are much harder to break. Clients start flying in not because they need to, but because they want it, and that's real power. You watch them laugh, talk, raise glasses as if everything here is completely normal. And the funny part is, to them, it actually is, because when you're high enough, everything becomes acceptable. You're no longer shocked, no longer thinking, you just observe and keep optimizing. You start to like that feeling, not the money, but the idea that you're controlling something bigger than yourself. A system where everyone has a role, and you are the only one who sees the whole picture. You think you control everything, and for a while that is true, until small details begin to drift off track. Someone doesn't come back. A question goes unanswered, a look feels different, but you ignore it. Because when things are working well, people tend to believe they always will. And that is usually when everything starts to change. At first, everything is only slightly off, small enough that you can rationalize it in a few seconds. Someone disappears, you assume they're busy or just don't want to return, and you choose not to dig deeper. A question appears a little more specific than usual, but you tell yourself it's probably just curiosity. A look feels different, less comfortable, harder to control, but you push it aside. Because when the system is working, you tend to believe it will continue, just like that. And honestly, for a while, it still works enough for you to keep going like nothing happened. But then, the signs start appearing more often, more clearly, and harder to ignore. A name gets mentioned, not in private rooms, but outside where you have no control. A small story starts spreading, unclear where it came from, but enough to catch your attention. You begin hearing your name in places it shouldn't be, and that is not a good sign. You check the system again. Everything looks right, still smooth, and that's what worries you more. Because if there's no visible flaw, the problem is usually somewhere you can't see. You start asking your people, gently, without pressure, but enough for them to understand the situation. They say everything is fine. Of course they do, because no one wants to be the one bringing bad news. And you understand the information you receive isn't always true. It's just what they think you want to hear. That's when you realize the problem isn't the system, it's the people inside it. The more people, the more variables, and variables are never fully controllable. You start tightening things, trusting less, checking more, no longer as easygoing as before. The atmosphere changes, no longer smooth, no longer relaxed, but slowly more tense. People work more carefully, speak less, and look at you slightly differently. You feel it, but you don't admit it, because admitting it means the problem is real. And you still believe if you control better, everything will go back to normal. But the problem is when you need to control too much, it means you're already losing control. One day, you hear someone is asking about you, not directly, but specific enough. Not a client, not someone inside the system, but an outsider. Someone outside the network. And that is what makes it truly dangerous. You try to handle it as usual, calls, connections, suppressing information, the way you always do. And for the first time, it doesn't disappear immediately, it just stays there, hanging. That feeling is strange because you're not used to things not disappearing when you want them to. You begin considering something might have gone too far beyond your reach. But then you reassure yourself. You have connections, leverage, and you've escaped worse situations. It sounds logical, and that's the problem, because sometimes the most logical thing is the most dangerous. Everything keeps going, but not the same, and you start to clearly feel one thing. The game is changing. At first, you think this is just another small problem, the kind that a few phone calls can easily fix. But this time, it doesn't disappear, it starts getting bigger, like someone is intentionally keeping it alive. That name shows up again and again, and you begin to understand this isn't a coincidence. An investigation, official now, no longer just rumors, and, for the first time, it feels real. You stay calm, you've been here before, and every time, you found a way out. You call your contacts, powerful names, people who owe you, or at least should. Some pick up, familiar voices reassuring you, saying, "Don't worry, it's nothing." And you believe them because you always believed in your network, the thing that kept you safe for years. But then a few calls go unanswered and you start to notice something isn't right. Messages ignored, calls going straight to voicemail, and that is not how it used to be. You try again, once, then again, but the more you try, the clearer it becomes. Your network isn't gone, it's just silent. And in your world, silence is always a sign that a decision has already been made. You start hearing, some people are keeping distance, not because they hate you, but because they understand the situation. They're not betraying you, they're protecting themselves, and that is terrifyingly logical. You realize everything you built was never loyalty, it was interest. And interest always changes when risk increases. You try to stay calm, but a thought starts growing in your head, and it's not comfortable. What if this time I don't get out? You've never had to answer that question, and honestly, you don't want to. The investigation moves further, no longer general. Now it starts pointing directly at you. Assets are checked, locations watched, and things once hidden begin to surface. You still believe you can control it, just need more time, a few more calls to the right people. But time isn't on your side this time, and every day things tighten. You hear about the charges more than expected, and if they're all true, there's no coming back. You don't panic. You're not that type. You just recalculate. If you can't erase it, reduce it. If you can't reduce it, redirect it. You start playing defense, less visible, less talk, and more observation. But there's one thing you can't control. Other people. Some names begin to surface, not from you, but from people who were once very close. No one says it directly, but you understand when pressure is high enough, everyone chooses safety. And for the first time, you feel something you always avoided thinking about. Not fear, but real loss of control. Everything happens faster than you think. When the system starts collapsing, it doesn't slow down, it falls freely. You get arrested, not in a shocking way, but the kind where you always knew this day would come. No resistance, no panic, just a moment where you realize the game is over. The news spreads faster than anything you ever controlled, and for the first time, you can't suppress it. Your name appears everywhere, not like before, not as power, but as something people want to avoid. You become someone the whole world knows, but no one wants to be associated with. The names that once sat with you disappear, no explanation, no goodbye, just silence. You try calling once, then many times, but now you already know the result. No one picks up. The network you trusted doesn't collapse. It simply removes you from a system. And you understand, you were never the center. You were just a part that could be replaced. In the cell, for the first time in a long time, you have nothing to do but think. No more plans, no more optimization, no more ways to control the outcome. You think about your decisions step by step, choice by choice, and you realize something uncomfortable. You weren't pushed here. You walked here yourself. You built the system layer by layer, step by step, and now it's tightening around you. No one needs to destroy it because it was designed to protect itself, and you are no longer something worth protecting. The days pass slow, heavy, and for the first time, you feel the weight of time. You hear people talk about you, not as a person, but as a story, a lesson, an example of going too far, of thinking you were above the rules and forgetting one thing. No one stands above the system forever, not even you. And one day, You realize the worst part isn't losing your freedom. It's that no one actually cares that you did. No one regrets, no one remembers, no one stands with you. Just silence and a world that keeps moving as if you never existed. And that's when you understand the greatest reputation you ever had wasn't power. It was becoming the most hated man. You spent your entire life making people need you. And in the end, you became the one the whole world wants to forget.